Recording this. So if you could please approve that request, that'd be great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Schell. I am the Congregation Archivist for the Adrian Dominican Sisters in Michigan, and I'm also currently serving as the past president, the Triennial Conference Chair, and also the Outreach Coordinator for ACWR. So it's my pleasure to welcome everybody this afternoon to our second joint ACWR-CWR webinar. We've been working closely with Amanda specifically and her team, so we're very excited to continue on, and hopefully there will be more joint sessions to follow in the next few years. I would like to do a quick little introduction to ACWR because this is a joint session. Some of you may not be as familiar with our organization. So for those of you who don't know, ACWR is the Organization for Archivists for Congregations for Women Religious. Today we represent over 135 communities, and our current membership is nearly 200. Like you, we offer many different types of services, usually in relation to resources, listservs, webinars, educational materials, and then every three years we have a conference. We're very active in the social justice space, Native American boarding schools, reconciliation projects. We've recently created a consultant and grant list for our members. And like us all, we are all hurling toward transition. And so all the things related into the lead up to that has been our primary focus for ACWR for the past couple of years. And since this is a joint venture, I'm going to pass the mic over to Amanda Hackett so she can introduce herself and CWR for the CWR folks.
Hello, everybody. As Lisa said, I'm Amanda Hackett. I'm on the CWR Board of Directors, and I'm on one of the co-chairs of the Education Committee. So for those of you who don't know, CWR is a professional organization with more than 200 members, both Catholic sisters and lay people. And we're people who serve as a voice for our congregation. So most of us serve in a communicator role, such as like writing, graphic design, webmaster, all the things. But in recent years, we've expanded our membership to include people who serve as other voices, such as archivists, professional or development professionals, and social justice promoters. Our members are primarily in the United States, but we also have international members in Canada, Australia, Italy, and Ireland. And collectively, we represent more than 140 religious congregations. I also just wanted to do a little plug for our annual conference this year, which will be held in Chicago. We have Heidi Schlumpf as our keynote speaker. She's a senior correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter, and she's going to be talking about telling stories of change within the church. So I thought that might be of interest to our archivist friends at ACWR. So I just wanted to share that. And I'll go ahead and share that in the chat if you have any more, if you'd like any more information. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Amanda. A few housekeeping items before I introduce the presentation and presenters today. So please hold your questions until the very end. If you would like to use your chat function in the meantime, so you don't lose your question or comment or idea, go ahead and please feel free to do so. Please make sure, I believe you're muted, but if not, please just make sure you're muted throughout the presentation. We do have a presentation that includes audio embedded within the present PowerPoint presentation, so you may want to turn your volume up so you can hear that. In some cases, these are recordings are a little hard to hear, especially when they're buffering. So, you may want to turn up your volume for that. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, this will be recorded and the PowerPoint will be made available. There will be a link and a follow-up email, I believe from CWR as well as ACWR, whoever you are a member of. You can go back and review it at your leisure. So now on to the presentation. So today we will be enjoying a presentation called Preserving Sacred Stories Through Oral History Programs. In this webinar, our hosts Sister Mary Cabrini and Julie and Sister Grace Marie will share their experience of spending 6 years traveling the country and recording the oral histories of sacred stories, as Sister Cabrini lovingly calls them, of 125 sisters. She will also share how she did this, including the technology she used, the methods, and her best practices. As we travel alongside Sister Cabrini, Julie, the Mission Communications Manager at the Felician Sisters of North America, will provide a communicator's lens of the project, including how these sacred stories have been and will be used for their congregation's communications. And Sister Grace Marie will then add her final thoughts from an archival perspective concerning the important historical value add of such a project. This project, as I think we can all agree, is a perfect example of what the magic that can happen when communicators and archivists come together. So first up, Sister Cabrini is a member of the Felician Sisters of North America, Our Lady of Hope Province, located in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. Upon retirement from leadership in her community and in Rome, who served as the local communicator, a position that she still holds today. Also, upon retirement, Sister Cabrini embarked upon a new ministry of recording the oral histories of her sisters. Rather than calling them oral histories, she prefers to call them sacred stories because each person is precious and has a unique story to relate. She traveled throughout North America for 6 years and has recorded 125 sisters' sacred stories. She recalls with joy this time in her life and is grateful to each of the sisters for her willingness to share her sacred story from the depth of her heart. Julie is a nonprofit executive with over 25 years of diverse experience in the religious, legal, education, and healthcare fields. She is currently the Mission Communications Manager with the Felician Sisters of North America and has considerable accomplishments in establishing and developing operational programming and strategy, fundraising and marketing initiatives, along with nonprofit governance. And finally, Sister Grace Marie was an elementary school teacher before getting her MLIS at the University of Pittsburgh in 2015. She has served her community, the Felician Sisters of North America, as archivist for 9 years. In 2021, she oversaw the move of the development of the new Felician Archive and Heritage Center in Livonia, Michigan, followed by a second wave of the move in 2023, which involved the remaining materials in the local archives. She's been a member of ACWR since 2015, first of the Technology Committee and now the Education Committee since 2019. She is currently the chair of that committee. Sister Grace Marie lives in Detroit, Michigan with 4 other sisters and 2 large dogs. Okay, so I'm gonna pass the mic over and we'll go ahead and get started.
Veronica, I think you could go to slide 3 since we have already spoken about the title as well as who the speakers are today. Good afternoon. I feel privileged to be speaking to such a dedicated and hardworking group of individuals. Let me begin my presentation by giving you some background about the project. Felician Sisters recognize that our sisters all had wonderful experiences through their lives, both as young people outside of community, and also they had many memories that they held close to their hearts as they traveled the Felician journey with us. We wanted to capture those recollections because of their historical value, primarily because of the historical value, and because they spoke to us of a sister's unique experiences in community. At the beginning of our congregation, which was in the 1850s in Poland, our foundress, Blessed Mary Angela, encouraged the sisters to write their everyday happenings, the events, the blessings that God had graced the congregation even in the early days of the beginnings. She lamented the fact that so many precious memories would be forgotten if they would not be written down. This very idea together with our Felician core value of respect for the dignity of the human person, is what gave rise to the Oral History Project. We valued each sister's individuality and knew that she herself had a unique story of how her life played out as a Felician sister. We felt we needed and wanted to preserve that uniqueness. We wanted to collect memories of those dedicated women religious before they were lost and could not be retrieved. Next slide, please. To begin, listen to a few teasers that will introduce you to our topic for today.
Veronica, can you click on the link?
I'm not sure it's going through. I don't know. All right.
Veronica, is that working on your end?
Yes, I could hear the audio. I hope everyone else could. Could you hear it?
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
No, we can't hear it.
Oh, oh no.
Normally, when you share your screen, there's a little thing to share audio. So you might have to
Share sound. Okay, we'll try it one more time here.
My name is Sister Mary Anthoniel Tichkowski. My age is 93.
My name is Sister Mary Danatha Suhita, and I am 91 years of age.
My name is Sister Mary Hilaria. I'm 101 years old. My name is Sister Mary Lucasia Marzalek. I am 99 years old.
My name is Sister Mary Emily Tamakovsky. I am 91 years old.
I am Sister Mary Dennis. I am 91 years old.
My name is Sister Rosemary Tomitsky. I am 91 years old.
My name is Sister Mary Markianik.
Next slide.
Next slide, Veronica.
The voices you just heard are random voices of the sisters who have been recorded. They have told their stories and their memories, which have been captured as part of this project. These stories were recorded in as far as California, as far east as Connecticut, as far south as Texas, as far north as Canada. Many of these sisters have already been called by the Lord for their heavenly reward. But of the number recorded, which was 125, approximately 25 of them are still with us. Next slide, please. So how did it all begin? I need to go back to the time when Sister Mary Christopher Moore, the provincial minister, and I were involved in a discussion. And this happened probably in the late 1990s. We were talking about recording our senior sisters. Both of us were quite interested in this project. Well, like many other projects facing leadership, we talked, but others, of course, had to take priority. So in 2012, when I returned from Rome, Sister Christopher and I were again discussing, this time thinking about a future ministry for me since I was available. Well, she posed the idea of oral history to me. I thought, I listened, I prayed about her offer, I recognized the importance of it and said yes. So it began. Sister Mary Christopher appointed me as the person who would record the stories, as well as Valerie Altman, our provincial coordinator and executive director of the Office of Mission Advancement, to work together with me. Next slide. In the days that followed, I began thinking about my ministry. And the more I thought about it, the more I didn't think that the title Oral History captured what this ministry was all about. I thought that it was very impersonal for something so personal. It was cold. It didn't capture the essence of what I would actually be recording. I thought, no, this is something that belongs only to this individual sister. Indeed, this is something that was holy. I knew that divine providence had worked in the lives of the sisters, and I wanted to preserve these blessings in their stories. To me, it was sacred. So I asked that the project for the Felician sisters be known as Sacred Stories. In this way, we were recognizing the importance of capturing diverse stories of Felician sisters, women religious who, like your own, dedicated their lives to helping, healing, educating, standing with the marginalized, helping those who were poor, and advocating for God's people throughout the 20th century. At the beginning of our project, our intention was simply to preserve the stories of the sisters, and the primary designated use at the time was archival. We were also thinking of placing snippets of the stories on the websites, possibly using them as excerpts that could be made available for vocation outreach, but that was about it. Julie Kresge, of course, will address these efforts later in the presentation and show you how they are thinking now of using them in different outreach techniques. Next slide, please. Our provincial communicator, Valerie Altman, was a great help for the project. I would be traveling about the province, which included all of North America and Canada, interviewing sisters and recording their stories. Meanwhile, Valerie had crafted some questions which could be used in the interviews, researched and provided appropriate technology, and ultimately handled the digitizing and preserving of the materials. This was a tremendous help to me, since I could not really continue my other duties in the province, record the stories, and do all that Valerie had been doing. But most importantly, I did not have the expertise which she had to get all of this done. So we made a very good team, and it was a good process. Next slide, please. So far in the presentation, you have heard quite a bit about the sacred stories. Let's give you a snippet of one of the sisters' stories. This is an excerpt of Sister Mary Dianette's lived experience when she was ousted from her Polish homeland as a young child. She traveled through Siberia and ended up in Mexico. And it was there that the impact of those formative years became her choice of life as a Felician sister. Now, you have to realize she is very soft-spoken, so you will have to listen very carefully. Okay, the recording, please.
I am Sister Mary Dianette Werner. I am 84 years old. I'm Poland born and round the world raised. I was born in Poland in a small town called Cumań. When war started, I was barely 9 years old. We were coming from school and Dad was arrested immediately because he worked for the government. And the bullets were just flying. If you didn't crawl on your belly, you were a dead duck immediately. So for weeks then, we lived in ditches in the forest. The Germans were bombing everything they saw higher than the ground. So eventually we were evicted from the house, so we took lodging across the yard from my grandmother. We were packed into one single room. They came in the morning, the Russians that is, at 2 a.m. and gave us 20 minutes to pack and get out. They packed us into the boxcars there. And so we rode in those boxcars. There was nothing, we didn't have much food. And if the train stopped anywhere in the wilderness, they told us to get out, take care of our physical needs, and they would stand in a row with guns loaded and pointed. Then we rode that way from 10th of February until April. It was just before Easter that we got into the Siberian settlement that they meant for us to stay. And so we finally got there and we lived in log cabins, just rude log cabins. We were there in Siberia a year and a half. And then we obtained amnesty from Stalin. And how that happened is Germans were encroaching into Russia, and Stalin didn't have enough army to fight Germans. So General Sikorsky and Enders told him that if he releases Poles from the lagers he's holding in Siberia, they'll train the army and they'll help him fight the Germans. So he released all the Poles, and so everybody was moving from extreme north to the extreme south, again by boxcars. We were traveling on barges and rivers, we were walking, we were traveling by their two-wheel wagons, and finally we arrived in Kazakhstan, and then Turkmenistan, and finally Uzbekistan. So eventually we were moved to Tehran, and there was a week-long trip by bus. Roosevelt said he would take us in, but first we came into Mexico, and that was October 24th, 1943. We were the last transport of children and adults that were coming into Colonia Santa Rosa. The Felician sisters came in after we were there for a year, I think. Sisters taught English and regular classes, religion, and Sister Doloretta used to teach shorthand and sciences.
Sister Dianette, what was it within your heart that made you want to come to the convent? I mean, you knew the Felician sisters from Mexico. That was your first exposure. What was your desire? What was your motivation?
Just observing how they worked and how they prayed, that kind of enticed me. I entered the aspirancy until I finished high school. Then, of course, we entered right after graduation. So there were 7 of us from aspirancy that were entering.
I appreciate your willingness in sharing your story. God has led you through many difficult times. It's been a great opportunity to talk with you, and I appreciate your willingness in sharing your story. Thank you.
All right, next slide. Just to make a comment about Sister Dianette's story. You can hear the emotion in her voice and how really saddened it was for her so many years after that had happened, you know. But she told it and told it beautifully. You may be thinking about those sisters that were interviewed. So let's focus on the interviewees. How did I choose those sisters? Honestly, it was a team effort. When I was first given this ministry, I decided to write to the local ministers of each of the central convents. They were our former provincial houses in 8 different areas. I wrote to the local archivists, the local communicators, and the provincial ministers of each of the former 8 provinces throughout North America. I asked them to surface names of sisters that could be interviewed. I gave them a few questions that would be helpful in identifying the sisters. I said, are there any sisters in your convent that have had firsthand memories of your early beginnings as a former province? Do any of your sisters spend time telling stories of their earlier days, and they enjoy doing that? Are there any sisters to whom you have said, you should write a book, or did you ever think of putting this in writing? In each of the areas, I asked that one of those individuals, either the former provincial, the communicator, the archivist, would be the liaison between that particular convent and myself. And I had wonderful cooperation. I needed those liaisons because I wanted them to, first of all, identify a definite space where we could meet for the oral history project. I needed to be sure that there was no paging, that it was quiet, it was secluded, that there wouldn't be any distractions. These liaisons worked beautifully with me. So when I went on my first visit, I began by interviewing the oldest sisters that they had suggested, because they would be the ones that could begin to have memory issues, and then their stories would be lost. The sisters were most willing to speak with me. I tried to put them at ease, and I wanted the interview to have some life, to be a conversation, a talking back and forth. So before we even started recording, I kind of prepped the sister to be looking at a conversation. Now, I purposely did not give them a list of questions beforehand, for fear that they would write the answers and then the interview would be stilted and stiff. I didn't want that. I had questions that were historical in nature, maybe talking about the beginnings of the province or a new ministry. They could tell their vocational story, talk about how their formation may have been very different than what formation was today. So I would interject these questions, which were in the back of my mind, and as the sister spoke, any one of these questions, if it fit what she was talking about, were part of the conversation. So the sisters provided excellent and unique stories that were indeed sacred to them and to me. Next slide, please. If you are thinking of recording the oral histories of your sisters, you can use either audio or video recordings, or both, I guess. It depends on your purpose, what you intend to do with them, and the resources that you may or may not have, because it can become quite expensive. Next slide. I'm sure by now you are wondering about the equipment that was used in the actual recording. First of all, we used only audio technology rather than coupling it with video. The rationale for this was if we would have used video, it would have involved more people traveling with me and much more equipment, and equipment that was quite sophisticated. But more importantly, we considered that the sisters would probably be less open to video and therefore less willing to tell their stories. You know, they would worry, how do I look? How does my hair look? And, you know, what kind of expression do I have on my face? So they didn't have to worry about any of this. It would also incur much more expense if we were to do the video along with it. So began the search for the best equipment. And here, Valerie was most knowledgeable and helpful in selecting that. If you look at the slide that's on the PowerPoint now, to the extreme left is an operation manual for the handy recorder. In the center picture, you actually see the recorder. Now, this was just about the size of your cell phone. That's how large it was. It fits in the palm of your hand, and it was probably a little bit heavier than your cell phone, but that's how small it was. And it produced a very high quality. I think you can hear that in the recordings that you've heard so far. Then when you look to the extreme right, there is the recorder that's hooked up, and the pictures are on the side are, okay, thank you. You get a better shot of the total pieces that are part of this equipment. There were two microphones, like the microphone you see on the stand there. I had one and the sister had one. And then you see the headset, which I had worn, and it enabled me to get very good sound. And I would caution the sister, it doesn't matter if you cough, it doesn't matter if you've made a mistake or you say, I forgot that, because that will be edited. That can be taken out. And that was, of course, part of Valerie's work. So, as I said, Valerie was most helpful in selecting this equipment. I had an H4n recorder, the two microphones, the stands, and the headset. I recorded them on very small Lexar memory cards. The ones I had used, now remember this is like 12 years back at least, had a memory of 4 gigabytes, which was a lot at that time, and would give me about 300 hours of recording time. Today, when I looked for Lexar memory cards, they're up to 80 gigabytes and so on. So you probably never even have to change it as you're recording on a particular visit. But this proved to be very good equipment. And Valerie even asked the representative of the company to meet with me and teach me how to use the equipment and feel comfortable with that. Next slide, please. At this point, let's hear another excerpt from the sacred story of Sister Mary Modesta. She is quite a feisty lady, and I think you'll pick that up even in the short recording that's here. She describes her passion for bringing care and comfort to the sick. She was always involved in healthcare. And this was her story of pioneering a healthcare ministry when she could no longer be full-time. And she began a program called No One Dies Alone. And this ministry continues even until this day. Sisters, her first few sentences, excuse me, I know there are others, sisters, laymen, and women. There are, her first few sentences are hard to understand. Maybe she was a bit nervous. I'm not sure, but that is how she speaks. It gets much better, so please be patient. And by the way, Sister Modesta is still living, and she is 99 years old. I think she was 86 when she was recorded. So let's hear what she has to say.
I am Sister Mary Modesta people, and I'm 89 years old as of today. When I graduated from the academy and came here to the novitiate, I told Sister that I want to be a sister and a nurse. Sister Emmanuel says, "You want to be a nurse, but we don't have a hospital." I said, "No, Sister, I will become a teacher and I will teach, but I know in my heart there's going to be a hospital on these grounds someday." In the early 1950s, Sister came and she said, "Guess what, Sister Modesta? We're planning a hospital. We don't need another nurse, but we don't have anybody for the lab and pharmacy." So they sent me to be trained as a medical technologist and to organize the lab. Years later, I was appointed president of St. Mary Hospital. When I was president, I went to a national convention in Chicago, and there was a study done of 400 family members. What did your loved one desire before they died? And on this video came two things. They want to be pain-free, and they do not want to die alone. It was like the Holy Spirit hovering over me and telling me in my heart, when you retire, that's your new ministry. Sister Mary Dennis was provincial minister. I came to her and said, "I have to retire. I have to start a new ministry." "You can't retire, you're president." I said, "I have to retire because I have to start a new ministry." "What ministry?" "No One Dies Alone." So they let me retire in January of 1998. By 2002, I bought orientation material so I know what I'm doing and teach others. I had 101 volunteers. The NOTA program purpose is to help the families to be, first of all, to be a reassuring presence for the dying patient. If they are not comatose, even if they're comatose, they cannot speak, they do not eat, but the sense of hearing is the last sense. So you can pray with them, you can talk to them, you can prepare them for their journey to heaven on the wings of their guardian angel. And it is such a joy, 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 joy for me and for the families to be there for the dying patients. Very, very much. And so it's a reassuring presence of us and my compassionate companions. That's what my volunteers are called, compassionate companions.
Thank you for the compassionate care that you have given and for this wonderful legacy that is part of St. Mary Mercy Hospital. You have been God's instrument to individuals who are on the last part of their journey home. And what a comfort that has been. Not only did the Lord inspire you with the idea for this program, but He has helped you to carry it through all these years.
Thank you very much.
Next slide.
So this project began in November of 2012 and ended in November of 2018. And it was a really joyful time, I must say, along with the other work for which I was responsible. But I looked forward to traveling to Michigan, New York, Illinois, Lodi, New Jersey, New Mexico, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Texas, and in Canada, in Mississauga and Ontario. The sisters were most welcoming and very, very willing to share their story. And in fact, I recall one of the sisters, we were in New Jersey at that time, and she was coming for her interview, and would you believe she had fallen, she had slipped on the carpet, and actually she broke her hip. I'm very sorry to say at that time, but she said, "Oh, and I really wanted to tell my story." And I said, "Adele, we'll get your story." So they were willing to share and wanted to share. The interviews that I had ranged anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. Of course, not in one sitting, of course. And I scheduled myself in a particular place when I knew I could be there at least for 2 days. And in that way, when I walked out the door at the end of the 2 days, I probably had anywhere from 10 to 12 sisters that had been recorded. So I tried to do at least one area per month, depending on what I had waiting for me at home. It didn't always work out that way, but for the most part, it did. And it was a very, very rewarding time, excuse me. So let's take, next slide, please. Let's take the time to listen to another segment of the sacred story of Sister Mary Raymond. Now, this sister was the youngest of all that I had interviewed. She was in her early 70s. And I wanted to interview her for 2 reasons. She had been having some physical medical problems, and I wanted to interview her because she had been involved in community leadership. In fact, she was our Minister General, and she had worked in bridging cultures of our sisters in 4 continents across the world. And a second reason I wanted to interview her was when she was in general leadership, that was the time that our foundress, Blessed Mary Angela Trzaskowska, was beatified in 1993. And she was directly involved in the beatification process. She was the only one left that had been so involved. And that was why I had wanted to capture her story. So let's hear what she has to say.
My name is Sister Mary Raymond Kaspchuk. I am 72 years of age and have been in religious life for 54 years. In terms of my vocation story, it's rather simple. I felt that going to the convent might be a possibility. And I said something to my parents. They were very much taken aback. I remember my father asking me one evening, "Well, why are you doing this?" And I can picture this scene in my bedroom, saying to him, "I just want to serve God."
When I entered religious life, I didn't come with any preconceived ideas or plans about what I was going to do in ministry. I just came to be a sister. After teaching first and second grade, within 2 years, I was assigned to teach at one of our high schools. Then because I was coming out of the educational sphere and we had so many schools here in the Buffalo Diocese, I became the director of education. And at that time with the diocese, when you were the director of education for an order, you really were the supervisor for those schools. Then there came a time when I was elected as a chapter delegate. That was the chapter in which the constitutions were being rewritten. And I have to say, because we spent 2 months on the constitutions and I was in the apostolate committee, that chapter really gave me a real love for the Constitution, so it became mine. I embraced it very, very much so. So then, at that chapter, I was elected as Vicar General.
Sister Raymond, I would like to look at your time in Rome on the General Council, because that was during the time that Blessed Mary Angela was beatified.
Yes, those were years that I really began to have what I felt was a very deep understanding of Blessed Angela. I look at different parts of the beatification process, and I can look at the reliquary that we have the relics in, and know that I sat at council meetings where we helped design that. Those are sacred, unforgettable moments, but just being a part of it and just seeing the joy of our sisters and hearing them cheer, and you wish they could have been multiplied 1,000-fold because only so many could make it. It's a once in a lifetime experience. See, those were also the years I was Vicar General for 6 years. Then I came home, I was provincial, and then I went back to Rome and became a Minister General, seeing the need for bringing the different parts of the congregation to understand each other. Another highlight was the ability to visit and to see some of the many missions that our sisters work with. And I can remember spending time with our sisters in Brazil, and then spending time in the Northwest Territory or in Kenya, or going to the Ukraine. You saw different parts of a ministry experience and of what people were going through that most Americans, and American sisters in particular, do not have a concept for.
I want to tell you about the communicator's role in this project. You see on the slide the many things of management of the oral history project that Valerie was involved in. She was the one who managed the project. When I would complete one of the Lexer memory cards on which the stories were told, I would turn it over to her. Valerie would then transcribe each sister's story, edit the story, create digital records, create 2 CDs of the oral history, and preserve the cards along with all of the materials. When she transcribed the stories, now that she's completed with that part of the project, or with the project, let's say, she now has 4 huge binders with transcriptions of each interview. Her role was critical to the preservation of these sacred stories and took endless hours of work, months of transcriptions. So she has been, as I said, invaluable to the project. I think you can see too that it takes a lot of people. It really takes teamwork to get a project like this. Not only the sister herself who is telling the story, but the people back home who researched and decided and suggested names for interviewing, the liaisons who kept in touch, Valerie, the people who sold the equipment and so on. So there was a great deal of teamwork in doing such a project. One of the, well, next slide, please. There's actually two more stories left. There's Sister Felicity, and then one at the very, very end. But this is Sister's story where she discusses her Polish roots and the interconnectedness of her grandparents when they searched for a new life in America, and how the Felician sisters helped the Polish immigrants really acclimate to this new country. So let's hear her story.
I am Sister Mary Felicity Wardzinski from the Buffalo area, presently 93 years of age. What strikes me when I reflect upon the past is how much the culture of a particular period affects you. I was born in Buffalo, as were my parents. I am a post-World War I baby, in that highly stimulated moral culture of the time after the war. My immigrant grandparents, who in spite of the oppression they themselves experienced, are a wonderful model of the type of immigrants that came from Poland, determined that they shall flee the oppression for the sake of the children to come. As one of my grandfathers told my father, it would have been worth to swim the Atlantic to come to America. One of my grandfathers was from the German partition. The boys there had to have 3 years of education, but no more. Girls were forbidden education. And I bring this up to show the impact on people under total oppression. So my own origin comes not simply from the Buffalo area, but from the Buffalo Pole area. And I am pointing out the influence of that, which also affected me in coming to this community, and the work we are doing, the obligation that these immigrants felt they owe to the children they will bring in this new world of freedom, to their ethnic and religious heritage. The sisters who came with the notion that they will prepare the next generation in what they need in this new country, but they will not let them lose what they had.
What was so attractive to you as a young child about the sisters that wanted you to be like them?
In my middle grades, began to think, I want to be like our sisters. The wisdom of the sisters, the love of the sisters impressed me. I saw something holy in them. I entered in 1935 and was number 56 in the aspirancy. Our contribution to the culture of America has been made possible because of the sacrifices of our mother foundress and an understanding by our leaders that we must be very faithful to the church. I can be completely joyful and completely deepened in my spiritual life just looking at the past and thanking God for granting me the grace to partake in that I participated in something as wonderful as our service to the immigrants having come from that background of Poland
through this community is something, even eternity won't be long enough for me to thank God.
You can see that, like her name, she was a very joyful person, Sister Felicity. And now, I was going to say Sister Julie. Julie is going to talk to you about how they will plan to use the oral histories today and moving forward.
Thank you, Sister Cabrini. So you can see all the work that has gone into recording 125 of the Felician sisters. So we have a lot of due diligence on our end moving forward, taking all of the binders of the transcripts as well as all the CDs and moving them forward with quite a few marketing tactics. We are also fortunate as Felician sisters to be coming up on our 150th anniversary. So some of this information will tie in before our anniversary in 2025 and then after in 2026. But we do intend to really edit the all of the histories so that they are a clean digital format worthy of posting on our website, on our YouTube channel, and other social media outlets. This will be completed through programs like Vimeo or Clipchamp. We will also do postings in our e-news. So that's an electronic newsletter. So we can put a link attached to a sister story. Folks will be able to easily just click on the link and they can hear a story, and that we can accomplish one a month moving forward. Of course, I think as most of the congregations on this line, they probably have some kind of a magazine, as do the Felician Sisters. So ours currently comes out biannually. There'll be a story as well as a link to our website page. All the sisters that have clean transcripts, they'll be in alphabetical order, so you can just click through and find the sister that you are looking for, or just, choose a sister to hear their stories. We are fortunate with our magazine that we get lay folks that tell us wonderful stories about our sisters. So they do remember fond memories of the Felician sisters. So it'd be great to pair them up with the audio clip as well. And then, of course, I think we mentioned only briefly, but we are opening up a Heritage Center in Livonia, Michigan, in November of 2026, I believe. I hope I have my dates right on that. And we would love to incorporate all of these stories into that exhibition in some way. We would, of course, enlist Sister Grace in helping us archiving all of these materials as well. And I'll let her discuss the archiving potential for these stories. And then just know on the back end, as marketers, we do like to track how well our communication efforts work. So Google Analytics will come into play, and we can see how many sister stories have been listened to the enjoyment of the audience. Next slide, please.
And Sister Grace is going to address this slide.
So, and I think Sister Cabrini really says this very well, but just to say it again, because it's important, is there is great value in documenting the firsthand experiences of these sisters. They are true primary sources. There is value in the history they impart and their perspective, but also in who they are, especially since many of them have gone to the Lord. So in kind of getting that snapshot of history through these oral histories is very important. From an archivist perspective, oral histories are interesting because they're created by many and diverse practitioners, not just archivists, but community organizers, families, independent researchers, many professions. Oral histories are primary sources. They are cultural objects. They are evidence of the past. and the context and story behind the interviews are very important. So when the stories are saved, the description and the metadata that's attached to it need to show that context at all levels. So the pre-interview, the interview, how it was processed, how it was preserved, and then how it was disseminated, shared.
Thank you,
It's
Sister
important to
Bree.
have, yes,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's okay.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I thought you were finished.
That's okay. I just have one or two more things. I'm cognizant of the time. That preservation is important, that we have multiple copies. And in terms of access, that the transcripts would be available to people, but that there are concerns related to ownership, copyright, permissions, and ethical use of the interviews that would be considered as you share the interviews and the transcripts. Back to you, Sister Cabrini.
Thank you. Next slide, please. We would like to finish up with an audio clip that is given by Sister Mary Arcangela. And she thought this incident that she will talk about was quite humorous and happened in the novitiate. And this was in the early 1900s and took place in our first provincial house of the former Coriopolis province. So that was in McKeesport. So listen to what Sister Arcangela has to say.
I'm Sister Mary Arcangela Galecki. I am 98 years old. I was born in November 20, 1913. And tomorrow I will be 99 years old. I can't even believe I'm going to be 99. When I entered, we slept in mattresses. There were sacks filled with hay or corn. The girls felt something hard the first night. So they dug into this sack and found out these cobs in there, and they threw it at us, and it hit us in the head. So we said, "Hey, what is that?" And we looked around. We put the light on, and we looked around. So that's what they want, a battle. So we dug into our sacks, and we took the corn, the hard part, and we're throwing at them. And they at us. The door opens, and who walks in is Mother Leona. We knelt down on the floor like as if the saint walked in, and we're staring at it. We're scared to death that they're going to throw us out of the convent. And so she says, "You know what?" And she's looking at us, and she starts laughing. Mm-hmm. She laughed out loud, and we were wondering why she's laughing. We looked at each other. Well, we had corn in our hair and corn in our PJs, all over us. And she didn't scold us. She's looking at us. She said, "You're waking the sisters up upstairs. They sleep above you." And we says, "Mother, please don't tell Sister Peregrine on us." That's the sister that took charge of us. And she said, "Oh," she said, "here I'm a provincial, and they're telling me not to tell Sister Peregrine. Don't you know that I'm the boss here?" And she said, "I won't tell her under one condition." And we said, "What?" And she says, "If you pick up every bit of that hay and corn from the floor and from your PJs and go to stuff them in that bag and go to bed." He said, okay, Mother." See, that's how nice she was. And every time she met us anywhere, she stopped and talked. She knew us so well.
So that's the story for Sister Mary Arcangela. And she lived to be 102 years old. And she was as alert as you would ever want to be. So she was a great person. So that concludes our discussion. And I think we have time for some questions if there are any. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. It's rare in a PowerPoint presentation over Zoom that we actually get to hear sister voices. And so I just want to acknowledge how special this presentation was. And also I want to congratulate Sister Cabrini because not everybody knows this, but this was her first webinar presentation. So I want to say you did a great job. And yes, applause, applause.
Thank you.
So lots of great talking points here, I think, but let's open it up to the floor. So if you have a question or, a comment, something you'd like to share, please, now is the time. I don't see anything in the chat right now, so you can just raise your hand or chime in. Looks like Carol has a question. Go ahead, Carol.
I just have a quick observation. For about a year now, I've trained to become a Wikipedia editor. And if any of these stories, if any congregations think they're notable, and I've heard some that really could rise to that, drop me a note. It's cs432@georgetown.edu, because to bounce on the oral histories, they could have a little Wikipedia presence when appropriate. There is a notability guideline, but we'll see. Maybe some will. I think some will.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Maybe drop that, Carol, in the chat box too, please.
I don't think I have access to the whole group. But I'll send
you can put it
Amanda.
in and Veronica can post it. Yeah.
Okay, Veronica.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Gibbon from the Congregation of St. Joseph in Cleveland, Ohio. I just want to thank you so much for continuing to inspire me to work on our oral history project. We are engaged in oral histories, and our focus is just kind of do it from age and health on down. So starting at the top as far as the age and trying to capture everybody, as many as we can, even if they were interviewed 30 years ago. And it becomes laborious and tiresome, and it involves a lot of travel. And capturing people when they're at their most lucid moments, healthiest moments, can be a real juggling job. So I just want to commend you for all of your work and for showing me why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm listening to those glimpses, and I know that I've captured them myself, but I haven't gone back and listened to my interviews, and I haven't gone back and lifted those little pieces. And I just want to thank you, because now I know I have just true gems and treasures in the stories that I've recorded, but I have not done anything with it. So thank you for continuing to inspire me.
Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, next we'll go to Joanne. Oh, take yourself off mute.
We go. I have been considering working with StoryCorps on NPR radio, and I just was wondering if anyone had any experience with that. And I rudimentarily used my phone with the video to do that with a sister that I'm thinking of for StoryCorps. And it's kind of rudimentary compared to what I just saw on your materials, but I just wonder if anybody has any tips on StoryCorps or any experience with that.
Well, Joanne, several years ago, probably at least 10 or 12, StoryCorps came to Pittsburgh, to Mount Mercy College, and they had, I guess it was Valerie Oltmans, who contacted me and asked if I would be willing to go to their university. It is now a university, and record sisters, and they would use it on StoryCorps. So I recorded sisters that came with me, and we have their CDs. But
Okay.
unfortunately, StoryCorps never got back in touch with us to tell us, how they are using that material.
Sure. Well, they tell you that they're archived in Washington. So that's one piece. I just was, I know they're every Friday they have one on NPR in the morning, but that's not what I was looking toward. It was just to have this sister archived in Washington because she worked in Appalachia, and that's so part of our United States history, to be a mover and a shaker in that part of the world. So I thought it was important we tape her. So I'll just keep working on getting the right equipment and working with her. Thank you, though. Thank you for this. This was excellent. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to jump over to the chat for a moment, Leo, so sit tight. Kenneth Gustin would like to know, are these available on a podcast?
Not currently. That is something we would move towards, but we really, with all of the 125 stories, we just got the CDs and the transcripts. So there's a lot of work kind of organizing them and putting them in the format for a podcast. But yes, that's something that's on our bucket list.
Great. Okay. One more from the chat, and then we'll cut over to Leo. Cecilia would like the link where we can hear the recordings. Is that something that you can make available?
Sure. If you could, Lisa or Amanda, get me a list of all the attendees today. When we have that live, we can certainly share that information.
Sure, we can do that, I'm sure. Is there a link that you can share in the chat and send it over to Veronica real quick?
They aren't currently posted on our website, so I don't have a link to share.
Got it. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Okay, let's go to Leo.
Hi, I appreciate the sharing of your sister's experience. I have a question though. As of right now, I'm the only person in the archives, and would there be and I found myself kind of at a disadvantage because first I'm not a sister, and secondly I'm a male, and would that hinder the sisters opening up? Do you find that in your would that be a hindrance, do you think, to sisters sharing their stories?
I don't think it would. It might take some adjustment, that's true, but I think they would. I think the sisters are happy to tell their story because it may be helpful in some way to another individual. Our sisters work very much alongside the laity. There are lay people employed here at the Provincial House where we're doing the webinar, and we have them in our own convents, and we work with them, we love them, and we consider them as part of our family. So I would say no.
Okay, thank you. I've been trying to partner with a sister to see if she could carry out the interview on our behalf, but sometimes when I get the recordings back, there's a lot of I'd like to call it sister speak between the two sisters. So I often wonder if I conducted the interview, if would be, I'm sure it's going to be a different tenor for sure, but would that I was afraid that it would kind of create a wall where we're trying to kind of break down or kind of be more would she be more open with me being an interviewer rather than a sister? So thank you for that. I'll try to schedule one soon. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Leo. Okay, back to the chat. So Katie and Sister Suzanne, if you could hold on a second. Carly Flanagan would like to know, can you speak a bit more about the editing process and suggested software?
Can you say that over again, Lisa? You cut out just a bit.
Yeah, sorry. Carly Flanagan would like to know about the editing process and the software used.
So the software is really the memory cards that were shown in the presentation. So those were converted over to CDs, and we will take those CDs and put them in a program like Clipchamp or Vimeo. They're two similar programs. You upload your audio and you are able to put in, we call it a donut. You can put in a title slide and an ending slide, and then you can also edit the segments of what the sisters are talking about. So if there's laughter or some phrase that they didn't feel that they got quite right, you can edit those out very simply in these programs, and then you just save it to a high definition file and just download it. So we have actually a series of stories on our website that were completed for Catholic Sisters Week that were done. They are videography files, not just audio files, but easily to just take little sound bites, put them together and make little stories from them, and then save them in the program and upload them to your website or to social media, actually.
Okay, thank you. Sister Suzanne Ryder, would you like to go next? And then we'll go to Katie.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I was fascinated by the sharing, and thank you very much for it. You have wonderful stories there in your archive. I tell you, I'm in the west of Ireland, and I'm a Mercy sister. So between the two, we're very, what we'd say, cúchalach. We're very shy about telling our stories. And it's like I have put out invitations. We have fairly good software because we're blessed that one of our communications group works in a local radio and has recommended, I think it's Rode microphones. So we're ready to go, but nobody wants to take it up. And I'm wondering, have any of you got any ideas as to how to inveigle sisters to tell their stories?
I wish I had an answer for you, sister, because I had great success in getting the sisters to tell their story. And I didn't mention this in the presentation, but of the 125 that I interviewed, only one of them, one not included in that 125, said she preferred not to. And for no personal reason, she just wanted not to do it. I might suggest that if you get the link that Julie had talked about, that perhaps if you use those stories, those snippets of stories to share with the sisters and say, well, how would you like to have your story recorded? And go back on what our foundress said. You know, we have so many blessings as a congregation, as individual sisters. Let's record them so we can save them for those who will come after us. We're preparing a path for them to walk. So right offhand, that's the best I can offer you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think one other thing, and I think Sister Cabrini alluded to this earlier in the presentation, audio recordings versus video, where somebody has to be on camera, sometimes is preferable, so they don't worry so much about how they look. It's just their voice coming through.
And also the fact that if they make a mistake, or if somebody coughs or loses her voice, that she or he doesn't have to worry, because that's going to be taken out, you know. And another thing that I didn't mention, after we finished recording the story, I usually said to the sisters, would you like to hear how it sounds? And so I would play part of it for them. So perhaps if you could be the one who would tell your story first and then use it as a sample for the others, that might help too.
Yeah, all of this is very helpful, but I have to say, listening to Leo, wasn't it Leo said, like, would sisters be uncomfortable with the man asking the questions? Our sisters, I think, would be delighted. That's the thing that would get them going and sharing their stories.
Go for it, sister, go for it.
All right, a couple additional suggestions from the chat box. Lena shared that to get sisters to share, her offering is maybe partner the sisters with people whom they love or who love them and have benefited from their ministries. And from Boston, the CSJ archive, my advice would be a pre-interview with the scope of the interview, goals and purpose is a good way to make connections and create a safe space. The sisters who are hesitant to share might feel more comfortable once talking beforehand and understanding what the oral history, sacred story goal is. So thank you for those additional shares. Anyone else have shares, comments, responses? We did schedule this for a nice chunk of time because we wanted to make sure that we gave enough time certainly for folks to kind of take all this in because the format is a little bit different with the oral history shares. Oh, looks like we have another couple of shares here. With the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth oral history, the Oral History Committee, we ask sisters to share the beautiful thing that God has done in their lives so they can feel the focus is less on them and more on the incredible work God does through them. It's a great way to do it. Wonderful. I have a quick question. As I was sitting here and listening to Sister Cabrini talk about sacred stories and being very intentional about changing the name from oral histories to sacred stories, I was curious to know, this was a ministry of yours, a very important ministry of yours. And so I was curious to know how this impacted you as the interviewer, having bared witness to all these really deeply touching, humorous, and everything in between stories.
Well, Lisa, I do have to say that I was very humbled that I would have the privilege to listen to these stories because they are just so personal. And I think that as I reflect back on this ministry that I have had, I am just so grateful for these beautiful women that have been part of my life, have been part of Felician life. And I was edified by their stories, edified by the hardships that they have endured. Just think back to Sister Dianette, who was the young girl born in Poland and traveled through Siberia and all the way through to Mexico. Can you imagine how that felt? Being in a boxcar for 2 or 3 months, taking care of your personal needs with soldiers in machine guns, right there. I was just so humbled and grateful for the women that have walked with me, because I think sometimes we don't realize that there are saints among us. There truly are.
Well, thank you, Sister Cabrini. I think that's a lovely way to end today. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody who carved out time today to join us this afternoon. And I especially want to thank my partners at CWR and those of us at ACWR very much look forward to our continued partnering on these webinars and perhaps other programs. So thank you, Amanda and Julie and everyone else who helped put all this together, because it was almost a year in the making again. So thank you again. Sister Grace Marie, thank you for your insightful perspectives from the archives. And we very much look forward to visiting you in a couple years when the new Heritage Room is up and running and hearing those oral histories. So, all right, everybody, have a great afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.